بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا Muhammad وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. Yes, brother, you had a question? Was that you?
I did ask a question, but you answered it quite nicely.
Yeah, no, somebody else. There were two other suggestions or questions. What were they?
One of them was to do with pride and arrogance and how to deal with it.
Pride and arrogance. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Pride and arrogance. The reason we have pride is because we love ourselves. And most people are selfish by nature. And we need some amount of selfishness to get somewhere. However, we need to overcome that selfishness and be selfless instead. And part of selfishness means that we want to see ourselves ascend above others. So there's multiple stages of this. One of them is the stage that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me something, how do I deal with that? If I see a certain capability within myself, a certain ability, how do I deal with that? So there's multiple things that will happen. One is that I feel that I've got a capability and somebody else doesn't have a capability, so it's going to make me think that I'm superior to you. Not everybody is going to think that way, but this is one possible reaction, that I'm superior to you. So one stage would be that I'm superior to you, but it just makes me feel that I'm better. But I don't say anything to you, it doesn't affect you, it doesn't cause me to affect you in any way. That is what they usually call, that is what you call kibr. When I think better and I look, so one is, I just think that I'm chosen or specially selected or specially gifted. And because of that, I start thinking myself to be special. Right? I start thinking, and I'm not necessarily comparing myself to anybody. I'm just thinking, MashaAllah, I have all of this stuff. I don't say MashaAllah actually, because if you said MashaAllah, then you would probably be thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for it. So let's start again. If you have certain capabilities and certain gifts, right, that others may not have, that you recognize within yourself, I think the first thing is, let's take the positive one, and you realize that that comes from Allah, so you realize that you have those strengths or capability, and you say, thank you Allah, Alhamdulillah. That's the best option. But unfortunately, if you don't know Allah, and you don't know Allah's system and the way He does things and what He gives in this world, then you won't think that way. Then you'll just start thinking, I've got all of this. May have told you that once I was in Hajj a few years ago, and there was this gentleman who, MashaAllah, wherever we went, he was first on the bus, he got the best seats on the bus. In Mina, he got the best location that he thought was the best, which was like by the door, he could get out, come in. And I noticed this because when you travel so much, you kind of have to figure out the best way to travel. Because traveling is difficult, so then you have to find out which seats to get and which place to be. There's certain hacking the travel to make it comfortable for yourself. So when I noticed him, I was like, man, this guy is seasoned, he knows what he's doing, right? So I kind of noticed it. And then one day I start speaking to him, and he said, Allah loves me. I said, MashaAllah. He said, look, Allah always gives me the best place, and Allah loves me. Now that's not necessarily a sign of Allah's love. Right? That's not necessary. At least he was saying Allah loves me. But that might be a delusion, because it depends on what you do with that. So as I said, if you thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, great, alhamdulillah. If you don't thank Allah, then there's three stages of this, the problematic stages. The first stage is called i'jab, the second stage is called kibr, and the third stage is called takabbur. Okay? That's when it gets problematic. I'jab is, we don't care about anybody else, but because of what you have, you just have an air about it. You don't necessarily look down on anybody else, but you just think you're the best. Right? You just think you're really good. There's no way to completely take other people out of that picture, but you just think that you are it. Right? You don't necessarily do anything to anyone, but you can just tell that this person thinks he's it. In some cases, it will give rise to humiliating somebody, but usually it doesn't in that stage. That's called i'jab. I'jab kulli dhi ra'yin bir. These people are very stubborn. They could be narcissistic. right? An aspect of that. They think they're always right, possibly, because they have something and they really are proud of that within themselves. Now, as soon as you start comparing yourself to others and disdaining others, you not actively do it, but you think you're better than everybody else, and that makes you look at people lowly. See, in the first stage, you didn't necessarily look at people lowly, you just felt you're the best type of thing, without directly putting anybody down. But in this case now, if you start actually, when you speak to somebody, when you deal with somebody, it shows that you don't respect them, right? You don't have any respect because you're disdaining them, you're degrading them, you think they're humiliated, they're not worth you, right? Some people are like that, but I'm saying in general that's how you think. That's called kibr now. And if that now leads you to actually do something against them and express it and disdain them vocally and so on, that's takabbur. So there's just subtle differences between them. What does this lead one to do? Well, it leads you to become stubborn because you can't be wrong, or even if you are wrong, because you're going to lose credibility. You think you're going to lose credibility, so that's why you defend yourself and defend a wrong position even though you know, so that leads to inad. It leads to inad and obstinacy, and of course then it leads to many other things where if somebody else becomes higher than you, then you're going to be jealous of them. So it will lead to jealousy and hasad. And then that could, jealousy then, there's sharri hasidin idha hasad. There's two levels of jealousy. One is that you just inside feel bad about somebody having more than you, but you don't do anything about it. And then the other one is where you actually go and scratch their car, right? Because they have a better car than yours. Or you say something to bring them down. Or you make a comment about them to somebody else to bring them down. So you can see what that happens. Now the problem is that with everything else, like if you're stingy, I think you can really tell that very easily. Once you start interacting with people, you'll figure out whether you're stingy or not, right? Whereas when you're angry, you should know that you get angry. That's something easy to tell. The most subtle and most difficult and hidden one of all of these problems is pride. Because you'll have it, and you might be able to deal with some major aspects of it, but there's always that's why when it comes to pride, pride also gives rise to riya and sum'ah. It means to show off. Riya literally means to be seen, and sum'ah means to be heard. So, inna yasir al-riya'i shirkun. Inna yasir al-riya'i shirkun. Even the most subtle amount of riya is a form of shirk, is a level of shirk. They say that that's when you try to get rid of blameworthy traits, they say that the last one that you could probably deal with, because it's so subtle, so ingrained, and it's so close to the human being because of love of the self, is the pride one. So now let's give a few examples of how to deal with this. Who thinks they can read well, like Quran? Who enjoys reading the Quran and think that Allah's given them a decent voice, decent tajweed maybe, and they like to read or sing? Anybody here? I mean, there has to be, within 10 people there must be 1 or 2 people, that's the probability. So who likes to sing and read and who think they can do it well? Everybody's a loser here, mashallah. Nobody can read well. Anybody? Jamil, anybody read well here? This Jamil and Zakaria.
They're scared you're going to make them read on camera.
No, I'm not going to make you read. I just want to give you an example, that's why. So imagine you think you can read very well. A qari is, usually the books talk about and the hadith talks about the qari. Because you're reading the Quran, you got a good voice, you can read well, and you're in the Quran. Man, that's multiple suburbs to elevate you. So remember, knowledge, when you know your stuff, or when you can read well, that's just that usually feeds your riya, right? It feeds your the pride problem. So that's why qaris have to be very careful. But imagine I stand in front of the mihrab and I'm the imam and I start reading. I've got to be concerned about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's who I'm reading to. But I'm also leading people and they're also listening to me. And I also want them to enjoy the salat. and I want to enjoy my own reading. That's multiple directions you have to focus on. You're reading one, but you have to read for Allah. There's the people behind you. A lot of the time it takes over what people are going to think. MashaAllah, you read very well. So you start reading and you're hoping that, Musa behind you or Anas behind you is going to, you're going to see them afterwards and they're going to like, yeah, man, that was good, right? So that's the focus. Now the thing is that you can still achieve the same thing without intending it and get more out of it, which is that you're standing in front of Allah. So you should be focused in the front. So literally physically focus on the front. Not that Allah is there and nowhere else or everywhere. Not that. It's just that that's who you're focusing on. So focus on Allah as to please Allah. And if you're good at it, meaning if you read well anyway, people are going to be happy anyway. But then you're going to make people pleased as just a bonus of making Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala pleased. But if you focus on behind you and just how they're going to feel, then Allah doesn't come into the picture. So can you see you're doing shirk here? That your salat, which is supposed to be Allah, you're praying for somebody else. A big element of it you're doing for somebody else. So that's a way to understand. When you stand there, get your intention right. That's why, in khutbahs, we say in the beginning, وَنَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنْ شُرُورِ أَنفُسِنَا. And we seek refuge from the evil of our nafs. So that when I start, I should be reading that to remind myself and seek protection from Allah that let this not be adulterated by what I'm doing. So, mashallah, when you start studying and teaching, there's lots of things to show off about. Right? Especially if you're good at what you're doing, you come first in the exam, or you get the mas'ala, you get the issue before everybody else does, or the teacher praises you, or you get the answer right, or you get good in the exam. This course, this path will give you many things to show off about. Multiple things to show off about, especially if you're very good at it. So that's why you have to be more careful, because you could just be destroying everything and you're not picking up any bonuses as you get along from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, though you're feeding your ego all the way through. So this is a wonderful course to feed your ego with if you're very clever and intelligent. Wonderful course for that. But you get nothing else after it. Right? So that's essentially what Riyah is. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us to understand it and direct ourselves in the right direction. Another thing that I find very, very useful is that, if I've got a capability or a quality, then just ponder and reflect and do muraqabah. Where did it come from? And then if you find that it's your own ability that you, mashallah, found in the ground somewhere, or grew it somewhere, or found it hidden in a treasure or something, and nobody else could have found it, and Allah had nothing to do with it, then yeah, praise yourself. But at the end of the day, you'll figure out that Allah had everything to do with it. You might say, well, it's because my dad was very intelligent, so it's genetics. My mum is very intelligent, and my father's very intelligent. I'm just very savvy about these things. Yeah, but who gave you that ability? Who gave you that ability? You could have been someone else. So that's why the best antidote is the ma'rifah of Allah. When you start doing dhikr and you start realizing that Allah is a reality, all of these things wane. Because then none of your own things become important anymore, because then you know that Allah is the one who gives everything. That is the main antidote to this. It's just to realize that Allah gave it to you. Yes, you did hard work, but then who gave you the ability to do hard work? Allah did. You had the right environment because your father was an alim as well, or whatever the case is. At the end of the day, it's Allah who put you into that position. You could have been born in another house, the way you wouldn't have even been on this path. So at the end of the day, Allah has played, it's always there. So when you remember that, that's the best antidote for it. May Allah protect us from it, because shaitan is what, he got rejected by that. There's always going to be reasons to be arrogant about, by the way. There's always going to be reasons. Remember that. I mean, shaitan comes up with this weird logic of being made of fire. Right? So he's better than those who are made of soil. Who would have even thought of that? Why would you even think of that? You don't have to think of that. But sometimes the shaitan makes the weirdest things a big deal for you, and then it just goes wrong from there. So Allah give us tawfiq. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.